Oh, good to see you. Just up the road, about 10-minute drive, there's Mandroy Falls. It's incredible. Let's get some fruit and check it out. All right, rock and roll. This hill, we'll head into the rainforest, Wooranoora National Park. Yeah, mate, it's amazing. All right, team, let's do it. Ready, mate? How's that for a root? Like, feel that, how strong that is.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land on which we stand, the Gulnay people. I wish to acknowledge my respect to their current and emerging elders and those in dreaming. I thank them for the contributions they have made in building this community. Councillors, our pastor has not arrived, so the opening prayer won't be delivered today. And we now move on to Mr. Sam Pagano's recent passing. Sam was the current chair of our River Trust. He was a long-time member of the Johnson-Russell River Catchment Association, a former chair of the Amateur Fishing Club, a long-serving Rotarian, and of late he delivered a fishing show on 4KZ called Hooked on Fishing, and he also did a show on a weekly basis on ABC Radio. So with the sad passing of Sam, we're going to have 1 minute silence. Please stand. Thank you. We'll move on to apologies. Are there any apologies? Take that as a no. Declaration of conflict. Declaration of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Are there any conflicts to declare, councillors? I'll take that as a no. Thank you. We move on to item 1, confirmation of the minutes, 1.1, page 3. The minutes of the local government meeting held on the 25th of November 2021. Would somebody move that they're a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 2, business arising. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Take that as a no. Thank you. We now move on to item 3, receipt of minutes, 3.1, page 39, the draft minutes of the Cassowary Coast Traffic Advisory Committee. And if we need any questions, Mr. Goodman will come forward and present these minutes. Morning.
Morning, councillors.
Morning, Mr. Goodman.
Councillors, this report is to provide council and the community with a copy of the current draft minutes of the Cassowary Coast Traffic Advisory Committee, 3rd November 2021. Councillors, this particular meeting did not have a large agenda, and so for the large part, essentially, most of the meeting was running through the action items that had been generated from previous meetings, and most of those action items are progressing reasonably well. I think one item that I might highlight as that did come up in general business is that of item 3.2, where the local police were able to identify some safety issues after the reseal on the Bruce Highway at Smith's Gap, where there was some confusion happening on the highway, where there was width enough for 2 lanes, but no line marking to indicate whether it was 1 lane or 2 lanes. And at the where that ended on the southbound lane, that was creating some issues, and that was identified to DTMR, and DTMR acted pretty swiftly in resolving that particular safety issue. So that was evidence that this group is acting well. It just so happens, as a general principle, those sorts of things we're encouraging not to wait for a meeting to be raised, and but as the group continues to work together as particular identified safety issues, as they are identified, that they are passed on to the team so that action can be taken. Just so happened that reseal had happened only days before, which was why it was addressed in general business at that meeting. These I just want to point out, these are the draft minutes. These have not yet been adopted as confirmed minutes by the group, but these are provided for your information. And the recommendation is that the draft minutes of the Cassowary Coast Traffic Advisory Committee be received and noted.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Any questions? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, morning, Mr. Goodman. Just a quick one, Mr. Goodman. If somebody in one of the residents have some issues that they'd like to be presented to the Traffic Consultative Committee, how do they go about that?
Residents that have safety concerns should, in the first instance, provide a customer request. We certainly don't want safety issues to be put on agenda and some time that they sit for a couple of months while we wait for the next meeting before there is some consideration. And matters that go to this committee usually require some investigation and a report to be provided to the committee before there is any consideration of that matter. So if residents have do identify a safety issue, they should simply put in a customer request to council. If it's on council infrastructure, or if it's on main roads controlled infrastructure, report that through their 131940 process. It may well be something which requires some further consideration or some guidance of the committee, and that I guess we would expect most of those suggestions or requests to be resolved through the customer request process, but it'll be the more complex issues that may then go through and flow through to the Traffic Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Mr. Goodman.
Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. Good morning, Mr. Goodman. Within this report at item 2.1, I noted the development of a significant school activity guideline. So I would ask that Harold Street in Silkwood also be reviewed as part of this, with the option to lower the current speed limit, or in this vicinity add speed humps similar to what you have got in the report, and the possibility of Harold Street to be widened in order to allow the flow of traffic in both directions, as it's too narrow for vehicles to pass safely, and this is the entry to a school zone. It was brought to my attention by the bus operators and some of the parents, so I just noted it in the report, so I thought I'd mention it.
Thank you, Councillor
I
Millwood.
also, and I also wanted to ask if you have any line of sight as to when we can expect to see a plan for the upgrade at Faluga on the highway.
Through the chair, sorry, Councillor Millwood, I was listening to the radio this morning, and work will start in January, and weather permitting will finish at the end of the year. That's what I heard on the radio from Mr. Knuth and Mark Bailey and stuff.
Yeah, I heard that, but I just was chasing, want to get my eyes on the plan so I can gather what's going to happen there.
We have Main Roads have provided us with copies of the design and what's intended to be delivered there. Essentially, East Faluga Road will not access the Bruce Highway at the same place. It'll be diverted reasonably significantly further to the north, and with a new intersection to be created there. One of the considerations that we had there that was adding some significant assets to council, depending on where the line in the sand of the what council owns and what DTMR owns, and the last correspondence that we had on that was the DTMR were comfortable with taking on all of that additional infrastructure as state-owned asset.
So have you got a map? Have you got a drawing of what, so I can have a look at it?
Yeah, we'll provide that to you, Councillor Millwood, through the chair.
And this was before I drove to work this morning, but when will the speed limit through Smith's Gap be put back to 100 now that the line marking and work has ceased? But I see they're back there this morning with stop and go lights, so...
Yeah, through the chair, I can't answer that. We did ask for some. I have asked for some general feedback. The DTMR are committed that project is certainly not complete and won't be complete until they have installed the overpass for the Cassowaries, and as such, that's work's under construction and work's not complete. That is the speed limit there is largely a matter for the contractor and DTMR, and so council has no control over that, and I would not expect them to be changing that to 100 kilometres an hour in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair, just wanting to thank TMR for the new wildlife signs. You've got that in the report. They were very tired and dirty and received a lot of complaints from both locals and visitors as well, because they were just old. So, yeah, it was great to see them being installed in the area, and yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, just on that question there from Councillor Millwood, Queensland Police Service at the previous meeting, they had raised concerns about those speed limits in Smith's Gap, and I know that was presented to TMR to try and get that sorted out for them pretty quick smart. But also, Mr. Goodman, I noticed on the entrances to the towns, Marillion, Innisfail, that we've had roadworks carried out just on the north and south sides of these. Could you elaborate what they are?
On the Bruce Highway?
On the Bruce Highway, that's correct.
On the main roads are. I think I know the scope of what you're talking about. DTMR have told us they have a significant program to just help motorists identify that they are entering into a township zone, and that they should look to alter their speed limit, or they are leaving a township zone and they can resume driving at Bruce Highway speeds, whether that be some of those will be maintained at 80, but that is that's the intent of the project, is to provide better guidance to and a much more visual notification to those travelling on the Bruce Highway that they are either entering or leaving a township zone.
It's a bit like what's happening around the Townsville, Bowen area, where they've got those red markings on the road, and yeah.
Yep, it is. It's the same through the chair. It's the same principles, and it's a statewide initiative. The Cairns region is different to the Townsville region, so different regions are implementing those at slightly different timeframes. But yes, it's the same principles. So that will be if you drive all the way to Brisbane, you'll see that same type of entry and exit type of statements right throughout Queensland on the major highways.
I thought that's what they were. I just wanted the general public to be aware what they were going to be.
So they'll be pretty red as well?
Yes, through the chair.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Goodman? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGoodman. We now move on to item 4, major projects. 4.1, page 49, normalisation of Port Hinchenbrook. And Mr. Bradford will present this report. Morning.
Morning. Morning, councillors. Mr. Bradford. Okay. This morning, I'm bringing to you an update report on the normalisation of Port Hinchenbrook. So over the last 12 months or so, we've certainly been doing a lot of negotiations. Officers have been with the Department of Local Government, Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning, and also the Commonwealth Government, as well as the liquidator for the company, the Passage Holdings. On the 1st of September this year, Council passed a resolution to support a request from the state to compulsory acquire a number of lots at Port Hinchenbrook for the operation of the sewage treatment plant and its associated assets. This included some roads and also a park within the facility. So the scope of the project for normalisation at Port Hinchenbrook will see a number of assets that are normally operated by council transfer across for council operations into the future. So these include sewage, roads, parks, stormwater and water management. Project has commenced to acquire these assets, and on last Friday there was we got notification that the land acquisition for 4 lots relating to the sewage treatment plant at Port Hinchenbrook and its associated effluent disposal land has been vested in council. There remains a number of lots within the estate that are still yet to be compulsory acquired. These include the road assets, which contain all the sewage infrastructure, the pipes and the pump stations, etc., to help that bring the sewage from the estate across to the treatment plant. Still a bit to go. The compulsory acquisition process sees the land go through a process of a decision as to whether the compulsory acquisition is approved by the Coordinator General. And then following that process and that decision, there's then a compensation process which is separate, which has yet to take place for the STP land that was changed hands last week. So that'll see a process where a valuation is established of what the land is worth, and then council will pay that that'll come out of the funding that's been provided for the project. Also, that's happened at the same time last week. There was a licence agreement between the state, the liquidator as well. That'll see council be able to operate the sewage infrastructure, including the STP, which we now own, but the infrastructure as well to maintain the pump stations and also the any issues with the sewage infrastructure throughout the Port Hinchenbrook estate. So in the absence of ownership, it basically gives us, the liquidator's given us authority to operate those assets so that we can provide sewage to the estate. Council's, there's a funding source through that for council to be paid for all out-of-pocket expenses relating to the operating of sewage. Additionally to that is the Environmental Authority, which is a key part of this process. So to operate a sewage treatment plant within Environmental Authority, it's currently owned currently with the liquidator or the company. The company then, part of the process will be that we will do a transfer as part of this process once the assets are transferred to council. So the project will also see an upgrade to the Cardwell Sewage Treatment Plant, which is a replacement of the current treatment plant that they're there now. So the new treatment plant, the construction is for a 1,500 equivalent persons plant with the initial infrastructure, with the initial infrastructure fitted out for 500 EP equivalent persons. That will allow us not so much to be able to manage when there's 1,500 equivalent persons using the treatment plant. It's more about us being able to make sure we've got a cost-effective approach for the future when we exceed 500. So. Additionally, following that project for the STP would probably be about 18 months we expect for the construction. We're still a little way off getting to a stage where construction can start. So once that does commence, we expect it'll take about 18 months for the completion. Additionally to this is the emergency dredging project as well. It's a $1.5 million funding from the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communications from the federal government for the dredging of 1 Mile Creek. So this project is in its final stages of negotiations with the federal government. As has been indicated previously, one of the concerns that council has is around the maintenance period, which is attached to that agreement with the federal government. We're working through what that means to council and how if we do take it on, what impacts that might have. So that's just where that project's at. So there's no agreement being signed for the funding for that project to commence at this stage, and officers are still negotiating with the federal government. The state funding agreement is for $6.3 million, which has been committed towards the STP and the associated normalisation of Port Hinchenbrook. So there's a number of aspects of that agreement which have been in the final stages of negotiations as well, and all going well, we might have that executed in the next couple of weeks. The federal funding agreement for the STP, we have completed our part of the process at this stage, and we're just waiting on final tick-off at the federal government level. The impacts on the conformed deed, there is potential some impacts there with us taking on sewage. At the moment under the conformed deed, it is a responsibility of the company. With us taking that on, there is a number of changes that will commence also with roads and things like that as well. So our solicitors are currently working with the state's representatives to look at what those impacts are and work through those for the future. Project management, so going forward, there is a need for this project to be managed with a dedicated project manager. So this report is also recommending that we will be looking to put on a over-established role to manage the entire normalisation from next year. So there's a number of risks within this project. It's a $15.75 million project. So any project of this size will have a number of risks that need to be managed, and there's a number of them listed in the report. It's not overly high in volume. It's to be expected probably with a project of this size, and there's a number of control measures indicated there for those risks and how council's currently managing those. From a financial perspective, the project funding at this stage is at 13.8 million, so that's a shortfall of 1.95 million, and that is a risk that has been identified in the report. So we've got some strategies for managing those, for sourcing that 1.95 million, which will stay to keep council within the guidelines that we've been provided, or the resolution that council's previously provided around it being funded by the residents or not funded by the general ratepayer. So in summary, the resolution today has a number of points. So the recommendation today is looking just to note the report, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to execute the funding agreement with the Queensland Government for the $6.3 million following final negotiations of the normalisation of Port Hinchenbrook. Authorise a budget amendment to recommend the income and expense of $945,000 excluding GST for Milestone 1 from the Queensland Government funding agreement. Authorise the Chief Executive Officer to execute the funding agreement for $6 million with the Australian Government following final negotiations for the construction of a Cardwell sewage treatment plant project. Request the Chief Executive Officer write to the Australian Government requesting additional funding of $1.95 million to fully fund the Cardwell sewage treatment plant project. Note the execution of the temporary licence agreement for the operation of the maintenance of the Hinchenbrook Harbour sewage system. Authorise the Chief Executive Officer to execute the funding agreement of $1.5 million with the Australian Government following final negotiations for the delivery of emergency dredging of 1 Mile Creek, while taking appropriate consideration for all risks associated with the funding requirements. 8. Funding an authorised budget amendment to recognise the income and expense for $1.5 million, excluding GST, for the Australian Government funding for the emergency dredging of 1 Mile Creek. Request the Chief Executive Officer bring a report to Council for the consideration for the awarding of the contract for the emergency dredging of 1 Mile Creek. And 10, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to engage a project manager in line with the state funding agreement. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Congratulations on a very comprehensive report. A huge amount of work's gone into this. Huge community expectation, particularly since Cyclone Yasi smashed that area. So I know there'll be a lot of questions, and I'll go to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and through the Chair, I must also commend this report, especially on the information we have in front of you, and I think you've answered a lot of questions that councillors and also the general public have been asking, and job well done there this morning. Just looking through this, I do have questions on dot 9, as I think we should seek clarification on adopting this recommendation, as the emergency dredging is such an important part, not only to our southern part of the Shire, but also our whole area, as we are still waiting for the maintenance format from the federal government. That's very important.
Mr. CEO.
Through the Chair, the work that we've been doing with the federal government has provided clarification that has made officers comfortable that that risk can be mitigated. So that clarity revolves around, exceptional events like cyclones. That would trigger other funding, I guess, if that was to cause this 1 Mile Creek to be non-navigable following an event like those. What item 9 is suggesting is that, like any procurement process, council would go out and run a procurement process. They would then bring back that procurement process to council to consider and to resolve. So whilst we're progressing through the recommendation to actually execute a funding agreement, there is still a large body of work for these gentlemen to undertake to actually go out and tender that work. So a report would come back to council detailing what that dredging program would look like and how that would cover that 5-year period for council to consider prior to progressing.
Further clarification, Councillor Barnes, if we adopt the recommendation today, all 10 points, that does not say to the community or the government that we've agreed to the dredging. A further resolution will be required, and that would be built on the back of our officers going out, looking at the maintenance conditions from the government and any risk that's associated with it. So voting on it today does not lock in the dredging.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And while I've got the floor, I also heard Mr. Bradford say so important to put on a good strong project manager. So being involved with putting the sewage into Mission Beach, no one knows better than Mr. Goodman and myself the importance of such a major company and a good strong company, because there's problems out there that only Dave and I know, eh, Dave? John planted that tree. You can't take that tree away. John's gone now. You can't. But lady, it's on council land. But the tree's got to go to put the trench in. We've seen it all, and they're really qualified for dealing with federal and state governments. Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Barnes? Councillor Millwood.
So through the chair, good morning. While I do want positive outcome for normalisation of Port Hinchenbrook, I have several questions in relation to this very important project. Item 4.1, the report highlights the mitigation. I note under the risk implications in the report that it is highlighted that the control for risks associated with a funding shortfall in the project budget is campaigning for additional funding and or for funding from defined benefit area within the Port Hinchenbrook. Can you please confirm that these controls will ensure that the general ratepayers within the Cassowary Coast region will not be paying for the normalisation?
Through the chair, the controls we have in place are what our treatment plans are. So we're looking to, one of the resolutions is to seek some further funding from the federal government, but if that is not successful, there is an option for council to certainly establish a defined benefit area within the Port Hinchenbrook estate and then charge a levy through their rates for that charge.
Can you explain what a benefited area is?
Yep, so a benefit area levy is when council can resolve to charge a special levy on a group of property owners for a specific purpose where they're getting a benefit from. So in this case, there's a sewage service being provided and we need to do upgrades. It's only benefiting the area of Port Hinchenbrook, and the property council can resolve to charge a levy in any way, shape or form, which goes on their rates notice to fund that charge. So
okay, so will this cost be added to the cost of the sewage charges?
It's separate to the sewage charges. It's a separate levy on its own, so it's another line on the rates notice for those property owners that have been within that defined benefit area.
Through the chair, Mr. Goodman, can you provide any clarity? Mission Beach sewage, when that was installed, a similar process?
Through the chair, yes, from I recall, it's a long time ago now, but very similar process, and certainly the rates that were finally charged were reflecting the final cost of the project, not an estimated cost that had been developed years before.
Do you remember what that was, Councillor Chewy?
No, I'm sorry. It was it was quite a few years ago, but I do remember it.
Okay.
Happening, yes.
I can add to that without getting it like within 5%. I note that the CFOs, they're ready to correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall that the initial charge was about $800 per pedestal, and over time that has increased with new costs, inflation, etc. That's just sitting just under $1,000 per pedestal for Mission Beach and Tully, which are essentially within the same scheme now.
Okay, so do you have any idea of the size and scope of the levy for this benefited area?
So through the chair, the defined benefit, the shortfall is 1.95 million. So if that is charged to the 300 property owners in that estate, it's about $6,500. But there is options that council has where we can space that over a couple of years or a number of years to reduce that burden on the ratepayer.
Okay, so if the residents of Port Hinchenbrook do not have the capacity to pay for these services, what are the implications?
It's considered outstanding rates. So same way if the rates aren't paid for any other property owner, there's a number of processes our rates team and council go through to recover those outstanding rates.
Okay. The report also highlights that the normalisation can be defined as council is to own and control all the land-based assets a council would normally own, operate and manage. For clarity, could you please confirm that the state funding agreement will 100% cover the cost of the acquisition of these assets and fund bringing these assets up to an acceptable standard for council to accept?
So, Chair, that is the project, yes.
Okay. So, in recommendation number 10, is seeking authorisation to engage a project manager in line with the state funding agreement. Can you confirm that this role will be fully funded by the state government grant?
Yes.
Through the chair, just a point of clarity on that. With the current negotiations, that could and will be funded if it's either an employee of council or a consultant that council engage.
Okay, I'm nearly there, sorry. Is the dredging project mentioned today purely for consideration only, and will this be followed up with a report to council before a contract is awarded? And can you just clarify what that means? Which I think you did earlier in the piece.
Okay. Yep. Through the chair, this report is to note that council is negotiating and to authorise the CEO to finalise those negotiations with the Australian federal government. Following that, yes, there will be a report brought to council to award a contract.
Okay. So after all the work that you've done, which I very much appreciate, and I do want Port Hinchenbrook to move forward, but at this point I don't have enough confidence that the wider ratepayers won't be suffering any costs from this. But anyway, that's only my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Mr Bradford.
Just want to make a point of thanking also Andrew, the CEO, and Mr Goodman, as well as the water team as well. They've put it's not just myself doing this. These guys are putting in a pair of effort. As well. Thank you.
Mr Goodman.
Through the chair, and I'm sure Mr Bradford won't mind me clarifying a statement that he just made. So that subsequent report would be for council's consideration on whether you award a contract or not. It would not be that you will award a contract. That subsequent report will be provided with all of the appropriate information, providing you with a much better understanding of the risks once we've hopefully finalised negotiations on a funding agreement, provide you with all that information, provide you probably with an opportunity to award a tender. But it would, I think the key word in the recommendation is for your consideration, and so that choice at that time is 100% council's to make at that time.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Councillor Chewy.
Yeah, once again, congratulations to the team for all the effort. It's been a long process and well done. Just a comment really. I'm just hoping that when this does move forward, that the Port Hinchenbrook will become a much more marketable place, and therefore the levy as more people move in and build, then the levy would obviously be spread among more people and would be a lesser amount. We would hope that this would be an incentive for real estate. Am I right in that assumption?
So, Chair, yes, there is. As development happens, it obviously economies of scale start to take effect, and we can, if there is opportunity there to reduce the sewage charges into the future, that will be certainly something I think council will consider. Yep.
Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to recommend you on the report as well. But also further to that, Councillor Millwood, some great questions there. I think the public would love to have heard them, which they have heard them. We've been getting asked a lot of those outside. My concern is in relation to the cost in the benefited area. Can that cost be decreased at all in any way?
Through the chair, it's a council decision on how much and what that amount is they're charging to looking to recover. So the decision is council's to make if they don't want to charge the full amount, or if they want to charge the full amount. How long they want to charge it is sort of how we can structure it in any way to recover those funds. So, yeah. All
right, because I was just thinking if we had potential for somebody to come and buy further properties in there, and there's more users, if that would downsize that cost.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Bradford. Councillor Barnes.
Further on that subject, Mr. Chairman, and it also depends on the amount of funding we get. Like the more funding we get, the lower that comes down. That's correct.
Through Chair, for the cost of the project, yes. The series charge that we've previously stated, upwards of $3,000, is not part of that amount. This would be on top of that amount.
And further on from what Mr. Goodman was talking about Mission Beach previously, unlike this project, is the people at Mission Beach had to pay that money and then on top of it had to hook the sewage up to their pedestal inside their private land. That's where these people are lucky enough that they're already on a STP system and they should have zero cost to the actual hookup.
Through the Chair, yes. So the project is related to the acquisition of the STP and then the construction of a new one. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Any further questions? The CEO would like to make a statement.
Through the Chair, just to thank the Queensland Government for their commitment and involvement in this project, and in particular the Local Government Division of the Department of State Development Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning. Obviously also acknowledging the work that the member for Hinchenbrook, Mr. Nick Demetto, has done advocating for this project at a state level, the federal member for Kennedy, Mr. Bob Catter, at a federal level, Senator Susan McDonald, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Barnaby Joyce, but also to acknowledge the liquidator for the company, Mr. Michael Brennan from Offermans as well, and his involvement in this process. As said, staff, Mr. Goodman, Mr. Bradford, officers that have been involved, but probably most importantly the community down there who have been fighting for the 1 Mile Creek emergency dredging and also the normalisation of this significant asset in our region.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. There is one other politician that needs to be mentioned. When the member for Hinchenbrook, Nick Demetto, raised this issue on several occasions, he was strongly supported by Deputy Premier Stephen Miles, and I want to acknowledge his contribution to this as well. Wouldn't have happened without the Deputy Premier. Before I put this to the vote, I just want to highlight that on August 1 we made a statement, all 7 of us, that when we took over waste, this is going to be the biggest decision this council's made. Well, I've got to say the decision today that's pending is up there. It's definitely up there. The community expectation around revitalising the southern entry point of our region, Port Hinchenbrook, is very, very significant. And with those few words, I also just want to say congratulations to our team, the work that's happened over the last 2 years. I want to acknowledge former CEO James Scott, who did a lot of work through the Department of State Development and Treasury. And then there was a transition to our new CEO, Andrew, or Mr. Graffin, who has taken the reins up smoothly, professionally, and here we are today. I would never have thought when we nominated for Council 2020 that we would be voting on a package where there's a 3-way partnership, local, state and federal government working together to resolve a matter that I never thought would ever get resolved. And with those few words, I'm now going to ask, I'll move the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Barnes seconds. All in favour? That's Councillor Barnes, Councillor McLeod, Councillor Baines, Councillor Chewy, Councillor Pervin, Councillor Nolan, and against? Councillor Millwood against. That's 6-1. The recommendation is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman and Mr. Bradford. We now move on to item 5, Economic Activation and Tourism, 5.1, page 58, the Targa Great Barrier Reef event, and Mr. Blanchett will present this report. Well done, mate. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, councillors, CEO. Just making sure the microphone's on. That's experience. So without further ado, the Targa Great Barrier Reef event report for 2021, and I'll take the report as read, Chairman, and just run through a couple of highlights of Targa Great Barrier Reef 2021. Our second year of being part of this event in the Cassowary Coast, and just to remind Council, our role is an activation role of the Council team to try and win these events such as Targa for the region. and to activate it, the community and the spaces. So that's a primary role of the council team. We had a big win with using a new tagline this year, which was Targa Town, and a really valuable tagline for media communications, a very strong tagline. Also for the community to take ownership of the event for Innisfail, and it had high value with the event organisers because it showed that the town of Innisfail really adopted the event. And if you see some of the video footage, that ownership reflected through the drivers as well, the participants of the event. We had to put the handbrake on a bit this year with the super stage, and that was a result, pretty much, it was an impact of COVID. Basically, as the event approached, a lot of our major events were impacted with COVID this year, and Targa team commendably worked very hard to make sure the event proceeded, but a lot of their participants couldn't make it up for the event. So with the handbrake on, we're still able to sustain a cavalcade for Innisfail. So the big feature pretty much was the Targa Fest, where Rankin Street turned into the Gumball Rally for a day, and there was some $12 million of cars there for the community of the whole Cassowary Coast to get up close to. Like to recognise there's a little celebrity board in there of some of the food and beverage businesses that signed up to be part of Targa Town. Again, a greater connection with local business in the event directly. So the event provides lunches for the participants, and they happily set up a voucher system through the businesses that signed on. These businesses received over 230 lunch vouchers directly, and there was a good spread of the drivers across those businesses, and they're keen to get involved next year. The report notes there were 2 stages in the event this year, and one they called the Bamboo Creek stage, so locals got to see the cars in action on a stage before the Targa Fest and the cavalcade. There's a summary of our council team work on the event from the start, highlighting our core measures, some details with those, and then the review we do. I just want to recognise some of the council team and just mention the great work of the works team under Graham Woods, who is a real asset to the technical side of working with the Targa crew about the roads and the stages. To his team that were out there getting the posters and signages up, and then post-event getting them down again. The communications team have done great work on connecting our community with the event and featuring it in our media. And of course the customer relations and services team that pulled together. In that, I think we have a really good model for a project team on events, because in our working meetings it also involved the mayor and councillors who could regularly sit with the operational team and see the progress. And for our team, that was valuable to get an idea that we're on target with the vision of council and the ambitions of council for events like this. We've got a little bit of one of the measures we look at leverage opportunities, and you'll note that after 2021 we had a list of ambitions for after 2020 for the ambitions for the 2021 event, and we ticked all of those off. We've started the list for next year, and that is the key one is to see the super stage happen. This is high value for Targa Australia, it's high value for Innisfail, it's high value for the drivers. So there's a few key leverage points we have there, and as we pull the project team together, we could add to those on leveraging opportunities for next year. There's a bit of economic modelling in the report. One of the measures is economics. Obviously, social measures are a high value as well. I've mentioned the council communications team work. There's a web page dedicated to the event, so for further input on the event, there's a video on there I'd recommend. We recruited local videographer HD Evolution, who packages this video together for council and Cassowary Coast to promote the event on. It features some really good interviews with drivers thanking Innisfail, feeling welcome and really acknowledging the red carpet laid out by Cassowary Coast at the start line. Closer to the finish line, there's a summary of the Targa media report there. Annually, they reach over 500,000 Australians, Targa Australia. And our event, you'll see the stats there on connecting with their 45,000 social media followers, over 250,000 watching the event on the Nine network. And it's still on free to air, so those viewing numbers keep going up through the year until we get to Targa 2022. So the report's suggesting after a successful 2021, we're all revved up and ready to accelerate into Targa 2022. And the recommendations for council from this report are that the report be received for the 2021 Targa Great Barrier Reef event. And recommendation number 2 is that council's approved support for this event for several years. With the handbrake on the super stage, we actually saved the investment from this year. So the recommendation is that due to COVID and the minimal expenditure on the event this year, council resolves that the CEO enters into negotiation in alignment with the current resolution LG 0930 for an additional year. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. I go to the portfolio holder, Councillor McLeod.
I just want to make mention that even though the super stage was scaled down to Cavalcade this year, it was great to see Innisfail transformed into Targa Town for the day, and the name was well received by all that attended. It allowed spaces in our region to be activated and allowed the community to get involved. Another highlight was Targa Fest on Rankin Street with 8 local businesses participating, and it was really good to see small businesses supporting major events like this in our town, and it also allowed the community to get up close and personal to all the cars. This year, Targa Great Barrier Reef generated $1.6 million for the regional economy and would have seen 3.5 prior to COVID. And not only does this event showcase our area within Australia, but internationally as well. I would like to give credit to our council staff and thank them for their hard work prior, during and after the event. Director of Delivery Services, Adam Sadler. Coordinator of Works Programming, you mentioned Graham Wood and his team. Zoe, Jade and Alan from Communications, and Jackie, Kim and yourself, Richard, from the Community Relations and Services. And just to make note that myself, as well as my children, are really looking forward to Targa 2022, and I encourage the entire Cassowary Coast to help make Targa Town rev up in Innisfail next year.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. I'd like to make a couple of comments as well. Congratulations to the staff. Thank you for taking the suggestion that we should recruit our new CEO to do the flag off. I just want to highlight, that was a love job. He didn't actually start work till the next day. So when the invitation went out, he was still in Broome. He had a kangaroo hop to get here. He looked pretty exhausted when he got here, but I know he enjoyed it. So thank you for the initiative to invite our new CEO to be the flag bearer. And leading up to that, we had a welcome pack presented to the family in the foyer. So it was a lovely touch. To Ms. Saffron and yourself, thank you in that networking workshop. You took the suggestion that we extend the offer to Mr. Graffin to do the flag off. Two comments I'd like to make about improving the event next year. I think we absolutely need a roving mic for communications. There were a couple of breakdowns with the convoy of vehicles, and we're not able to foresee outside of the CBD what's happened. The spectators were getting impatient, and we definitely need a roving mic. And the other thing I'd like to see is bring a bit of the footy show into the event, on the couch interviews. We've got the couch there. Councillor McLeod's children used it on the day, and so did Mr. Graffin. But I'd like to see the portfolio holder interview the drivers on the couch.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. It's the flag off for what's all compliment to the idea. Actually, it was a fantastic idea, and using the council logo flag made it even more prominent, and that made network news. So congratulations on the idea. And I was just going to mention the VIP lounge, including the couch, is highlighted for next year. And in seriousness, that provided really good value for the drivers. There's an essential need to go to the toilet when you've been in a car for a few hours. So that aspect was a value with having the council open, but also the interaction with our Art Deco building was noted with the organisers. And finally, the roving mic, thank you, we've noted that. And there's an additional aspect with our brief with Targa that we want them to communicate better to us on the ground from the stage.
Yep.
And we have the mic noted in there. So thank you for your input.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. Through the chair, I see the date for next year is the same, first weekend in September. I know September is such a busy month. I just want to put it out there to the public because other groups are now organising their events for next year, and I would hate to clash with too many things on the same weekend. So if you could just clarify, Mr. Blanchett, the dates for next year's event, please.
Yeah, through the chair, confirming it's the first weekend in September, so they have confirmed that. Which is again Father's Day for our Sunday. And it's very a compliment to Targa Australia for confirming that early for the reasons you mentioned, because they have to coordinate that regionally, including the challenge of the Cranda Range. So we're locked in for Sunday again, that first weekend in September.
Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Blanchett. Excellent report there. Just on the Sunday, 4th of September one, just can you inform me if the week before that is actually the Auto Fest as well? Have we got a bit of a rev head couple of fortnights, have we?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. Well, Innisfail's really proven to be popular with motorsports. So we are working towards that with Auto Fest. And that's to be finalised, contract to be finalised, but a complimentary event. It's a different event to Targa, which is a touring event, but that event would ideally land the weekend before.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin, for that question. Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. I was just going to commend you also because we were there on the morning of the cavalcade and everybody was so positive and so happy with what was happening. So job well done.
Thank you, Councillor.
They'll burn up some more rubber next year.
Any further comments or questions for the officer? If not, somebody move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor McLeod, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blanchett.
Thank you.
And you've got another one, 5.2.65, the Innisfail Visitor Information Centre.
Yep. Thank you. Backing up today, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So again, taking the report read on the Innisfail Visitor Information Centre. So just to qualify, the report being delivered is in response to a request from Council. The resolution being that Council establish a tourist information centre at the Con Theatre in Innisfail in a manner to be considered by Council following provision of information from relevant staff as to how this could be achieved. This would be for a 12-month trial period. So this report is in response to that resolution. In starting working towards the report, there's a review of where visitor information centres fit in the framework of destination Cassowary Coast and tourism in general. So the report does include just a touch on the framework of the tourism industry and reminding us that visitor centres are one link in the whole chain of a destination. Also, there's a graph featured in there as a reminder of the customer's journey and where visitor information centres are one component of visitor services, which is, is heavily led by the digital interaction and word of mouth with their companion travellers. So we have 642,000 visitors to the Cassowary Coast each year, according to Tourism Research Australia. And our visitor information centre is a highly valued service, particularly because we're a drive market. So there's questions and for travellers that they value the Visitor Information Centre service to assist them with. So the report responds to the resolution looking towards the con as opposed to where we're located at Anzac Park. We've done a bit of homework in preparation for council on the decision on the line items involved with relocating the visitor centre and the related budget for those. Aside of this report, we're also well into a visitor information services strategy, and that work will look at the whole destination and our visitor services, including the centres. Because that work is happening at the same time, we've managed to get a bit of a comparison on alternative locations in Innisfail to assist the decision making on the report, with some measures on the different locations, but also some budget information there as well. In addition, if council decides for relocation, the current facility, the information van, the future of that would need to be considered, and how that van is utilised into the future. We've managed to have a stakeholder meeting with the users of the con, so there's a bit of summary from them on their opportunities and challenges in that venue. There would be some disruption to some use, which would need to be managed if this was to go forward. And timing is also a consideration around the customers. So often when you do these processes, the customer is never in the room. So it's important we have a customer focus that their timing is seasonal, which is winter. So fortunately, summer is a quiet season for us in this process. So finally, in summary, the considerations for the establishment of the visitor centre at the con. The reviewed location, the setting up, the operational aspects, the shared facilities and related costs to be budgeted for are noted in the report. This is isolated from the work on the Visitor Information Services strategy, and the result is the recommendations of the report for council. Recommendation number 1, council receive the report on the Innisfail Visitor Information Centre. And recommendation number 2, council resolve to endorse one of the following 3 options relative to establishing a visitor information centre at the Conservatorium Theatre. The options are A, establish and set up the con; B, maintain current visitor information services at Anzac Park with a review of a location as part of the visitor information services strategy; or C, relocate the IVAN to the con, trial the location and test the location for input into the Visitor Information Services strategy. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. I'll go to the portfolio holder for Tourism and Economic Activation initially, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, and through the chair. Before we make any decisions on this recommendation, I'd like to table an alternate motion, please. 1, that the council acknowledge the benefits that visitor servicing provides to the visitor economy. 2, that council note the development of a visitor information servicing strategy is underway and will be presented for council consideration early in 2022. And 3, that council defer this decision until a visitor information servicing strategy is adopted. The reason is that council is currently developing a visitor information servicing strategy which will be provided to council in early 2022. As such, the decision should be deferred and informed by this strategy at that time.
I'll second that alternate motion. Anybody wish to speak? Does the mover want to speak in favour of it? No, you reserve your right. Okay. Councillor Millwood wishes to speak in favour.
Yeah, so through the chair, council is currently undertaking a strategic plan for our visitor information centres, which is due for completion in February, and we already have a great information centre at the Sugar Museum, and I feel council should support the services as this comes at no cost to council but could be supported by council. And it not only provides visitor information services, but it offers visitors to our region the opportunity to endure an experience of learning about our heritage. So I'd also like to ask that this be considered in the strategic planning as an option.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Pervin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak on the original motion, if I could.
Yep, okay.
Just in relation to that, look, I've heard Councillor McLeod's option there for an amendment. I would support that, but I'd also like to see option 2A be looked at in a bit more detail by our officers in relation to cost to setting up a Peninsula Conservatorium. $145,000 seems a fair bit of money, and I think we could really skim that down a lot and come in a bit more feasible sort of a price than $145,000. So I'd like that to be looked at as well.
Councillor Perman, you'd be happy if the officer does that during the strategy?
Yeah, I would be happy for the officer to do that during the strategy, and I will support the motion put forward by Councillor McLeod.
Okay, the alternate motion has been put and seconded. There's been a couple of speakers. Anybody else wish to speak for or against? If not, the alternate motion is put to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blanchett.
Thank you, Chair.
We move on to item 6, Governance, Environment and Finance, 6.1, page 70, Finance Report, and Mr. Smith will present this report. Welcome. Morning.
Morning, councillors. Mr. Smith. Morning. Councillors, before you is the finance report. Now, this report takes us up to the period to the end of to the 29th of November 2021. This finance report provides information on council's year-to-date revenue and expenditure up to that period. Some of the highlights as far as operational revenue is $43.3 million year-to-date. Operational expenditure is $38.2 million year-to-date, which is $3 million under budget. Capital expenditure, including commitments, is $23.8 million year-to-date. At the end of November, council had cash balances of $50.3 million. Page 71 has a table showing the revenue and expenditure details, comparing actuals to budget. And over the page on page 72, there is a number of key variances from actual to budget. I just wish to note a couple of them. The first one is the net rates and utilities is under budget due to payment of the 6-monthly fire contributions levy. The budget that relates to that item has been phased out to a future period, and that will be amended in the December report to bring that back into line. And on the expenditure side is the employee expenses are under budget, and that's mainly to do with the last pay period in November hadn't yet been processed when this report was run. At the bottom of page 72 is a table with the details the investments of council's cash holdings. So at the end of November, we had $50.3 million in cash, and we had invested that at an average interest rate of 0.56%. Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is that the report be received and noted. Happy to take any questions.
Smith. Any questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
We move on to item 7, Asset Sustainability, 7.1, page 85, CCR Capital Report, and Mr. Cassell will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Mr. Graffin. With the permission of council, I come before you this morning to present the capital works report for November 2021. And the executive summary is, I take it obviously that the report's been read, so I'll stick to the executive summary. It is the council has adopted the capital works program for 21-22 financial year, and this status is reported monthly. This is the November report. Council is advancing the delivery of capital works projects commenced in prior years, as well as the new projects in 21-22. We currently have 258 projects on foot with a total budget of $49.7 million. Now, as of November 29, 2021, the council has expended $23.8 million worth of capital works projects, including commitments, and that represents 48% of the year. Now, there are some particular highlights I'd like to go through in the capital report. First of all, roads are currently sitting at around the 59%, bridges 68%, paths and bikeways are sitting at 61%, the waste management is sitting around 82%, and regional tourism development is actually sitting around 162%, so quite a heavy commitment on that particular one there. Some that are still coming along would be the marine facilities is sitting around 10%, recreation and natural areas around 13%, water 35%, and sewerage 43% in terms of funds spent as of the date of the report. So in the pre-construction phase for November, there are 69 projects still in the planning phase, or around $13.4 million worth. There are 23 projects in the procurement phase, around $2.65 million worth. Commenced in November with 3 projects, total value around $3.1 million. Out of those, 25% are complete, or 20 projects, around $4.7 million. Those that are greater than 50% complete are 12 projects for a total value around $7 million. So the total of those is 56 projects for a total spend on budget around $18 million. And in post-construction, so as of November 21, we had 74 projects complete for a total of around $8.4 million.
Thank you, Mr. Cassell. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. I have several. Thank you, through the chair. Just the South Mission Beach Path, Mr. Castle, stages 1 and 2. Do you have? Can you provide any information?
Yes, through the chair, I would like to invite my director, Mr. Goodman, up. He's got some very specific details, and
thank you.
His knowledge is quite expansive on these matters.
Mr. Cassell, have you ever played halfback?
I did actually.
Okay. I could see that.
That was a long time ago, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
okay. Through the chair, I have played halfback,
good.
Mr.
Two
Mayor,
halves together.
and so I'd invite Mr. Castle to respond with regard to stage 1, where he's a superintendent on the project and well versed on that particular project. And I'll certainly, while I've got the mic, I will address stage 2. So stage 2, there is funding in this budget to develop the project and design the project. The design team are well advanced in that project, dealing with some particular issues, not unlike some of the issues that Councillor Barnes raised earlier in Mission Beach, in dealing with plantings on the road reserve and how we deal with customers in that space. But we are working hard to find a solution that will deliver a quality project, a long-term quality project with reasonable whole of life costs, while taking into account the concerns of the residents. So that project, we're very comfortable will be fully designed, and if funded next year, that's consideration for council. Obviously, in the upcoming budget, we'll be ready to deliver if council chooses to do so. With regard to stage 1, I'll pass that back to Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Stage 1 was the about 164 odd metres of concrete footpath that ran down past the caravan park, across the road, down past the canoeing club and along the esplanade. It's approximately 94% complete to date. So all the concrete paths in, or all the curb and channel and things are in. There were some design changes involved on the run on that particular project. There were some hidden things that we noticed when the construction was taking place. In particular, it seems that Telstra had drilled straight through some of our water pits and put their conduits and cables, and some quite interesting things that we discovered. So there were some changes to the drainage. But all in all, the project is now down to just some turfing, some clean-up, a little bit of seal on the road, which I believe will all be done Monday. So the total project should be finished, excluding the playground. There were some design issues around moving and relocating the playground, which will become an issue separate to works under contract. So the whole project should be finished by middle of next week.
Thank you. Just the Bingle Bay path, I know work has been done with Mr Fisher's team. Can you give me an update on how that might proceed from here, please?
Mr Goodman, please.
Through the chair, again, that's a project that is we're committed to having in a shovel-ready state for consideration in next year's budget for delivery. The designers are reasonably well advanced on that project, and I don't know what more I could add to that, but the design is reasonably well advanced, certainly not finalised, still working again with a few issues with vegetation on the footpath area, services and the like, but certainly well advanced, and anticipate that one will be ready to go in next financial year should council wish to proceed with it.
Thank you.
There is no committed funding, external funding for that project.
Thank you.
The chair.
I see in the report the library, the car park has been finished with the markings. Just that there was talk of a sign. Do we know when the sign might be installed, just to finish the package off nicely?
I'm not aware of that particular issue, but I'm taking on notice.
Thank you.
And provide you an update.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr.
I've got
Chair.
one more.
Sorry.
One more. Sorry, Councillor Barnes. They work at the car park at Mission Beach behind Porter's Promenade. How is that progressing, please?
I'll put that one again to Mr Goodman.
I think Mr Graffin's ready to answer that. He probably sees it more often than I do.
I think through the chair, all accounts progressing well. I understand that works to be mostly practically complete by the 17th of December, but base course is in and getting prepped for seal. Concrete footpaths around that car park were commencing pouring this morning, and I think timing of that project and completion of that project will fit in well with the upcoming wet season.
Thank you.
Through the chair, a question probably for Mr Goodman. We're currently up to 48% of our works program. Have we been throwing enough overtime at our staff, or have we been encouraging contract labour or contractors in, as we've been extremely lucky weather-wise, as we're probably one of the driest shires in Queensland this year up to this stage. And it's amazing that we haven't been getting the rain of other shires. Yes, I agree with you. But have you got any appetite, now that we're 50%, when we're going into our wettest time, should we be looking as a council to spark things up?
Through the chair. Might depend on your definition of this year and how wet it's been. There's certainly been an enormous amount of rain here, but agree that there's a large amount of Queensland right now that's got dealing with flooding issues, and we are not, which is an unusual circumstance. In terms of, and I guess this comes down to definition, Mr Deputy Mayor. Under my definition, we would not be throwing overtime at people, but certainly where there is an appetite for our day labour teams to to do overtime, and where we assess that is beneficial for the project in terms of delivery, accelerating delivery, and understanding the next project, not just that project, in our desire to deliver projects. Certainly, overtime approval, particularly on the capital works projects, is available to our internal teams and encouraged. I would just say that the 48% is including commitments. So that's a generous measure, because the sort of major projects where we would sign a purchase order, just as an example, if we signed that purchase order for a contract the day before this report was generated, for $2 million, then that would show up as a commitment of $2 million before a real dollar's been spent on the ground. So council should be aware that 48% is including commitments and what those commitments mean. On the reason why you should know that, but also not just on cash expenditure, is with contracts in particular, the claims would be, monthly in normal circumstances, and so you will have a lot more works delivered in terms of value than what we've paid out in cash. So the real number's somewhere between the actual expenditure. I guess the real number in terms of providing you with an expenditure of what has been delivered on the ground is somewhere between the number that we have in actual expenditure plus the committals. I would just provide a little more context to that. It is the case that if you look through our status alerts, it's almost a sea of green there. I think we'll be asking our project managers who are delivering these projects to take a more detailed look at their programs and the number of projects they got. As an example, we are forecasting across the business right now, which is the basis for these green lights, monthly expenditure on our capital projects next year through March, April, May of around $4 million a month. And if you contrast that with the September, October, November of this year, that's more than $1.5 million than what we averaged through there. So I feel that there's some reasonably optimistic forecasting based on historical expenditure and acknowledging what is the normal weather pattern for our region in that March, April, May period next year. So I'll be asking the team to provide, I think, better, more considered advice to council in the future. That being said, 48% of commitments and the planning and the resourcing that we're providing to delivery of the capital program is significantly more than we have in the past. So I do anticipate better delivery than what we have been able to achieve in the past this financial year.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Millwood.
Is Barry finished?
No, thank you. Thank you for a very intense response. It was very detailed and lengthy, like War and Peace. I think it was great. But I think, and it's only my opinion, and I've seen a great speed up of projects, especially in the last few months. I think it's been tremendous. But I think before our monsoons do get here, it'll be great to see an appetite maybe to get contractors or day labour to try and speed a lot up, because we do close for Christmas very shortly for a short break, And before the monsoons, it'd be great because it'd be nothing worse than seeing jobs now put on the back, shelved now way through until it dries up in June.
I'll, through the chair, Councillor Barnes, I'll simplify my answer. We do have significant appetite for accelerating our program and trying to achieve delivery of program while the weather suits. That is what we're doing.
Councillor Barnes, you comfortable with that second response? Thank you. For the minutes, purpose of the minutes. Councillor Millward.
Yeah, through the chair. I see that the car park in Richardson Street has been resealed. I do believe that's going to be line marked for RV parking. And do we have some signage to go with that?
Through the chair, yes, it'll be line marked. Yes, there'll be some provision there for larger vehicles. I haven't reviewed the signage plans, but happy to get the team to provide them to you.
Sure. And there's one other thing. With Atherton Road, I've had a very anxious person ring me the last few days. I have asked them to contact you. When is this actually earmarked to start? And is there the possibility that we could address the concerns before we actually start?
Through the chair, that project is not one that's identified in the capital program, but I'm happy to address it. It's because it's it just comes down to definition, and it is a council project that we had wanted to deliver. We were about to start on that project, which essentially widens and improves the drainage away from Silkwood down to the south along Atherton Road. We've assessed the flooding impacts, and to be honest, it has almost zero impact on any significant flooding event, either to the town of Silkwood or to the downstream receivers in Atherton Road. What it potentially would have done was, in a very minor rainfall event, not even a flood event, assisted in removing some surface water, and then post a larger flood event, cleaned up that area of Silkwood quicker. Unfortunately, as we've gone into the final stages of implementation, there's been some issues identified with this project, which would require encroachment out of the road area into land that we don't control. It's only a very small encroachment, and I won't talk about who that particular landowner is, but that landowner has raised significant concern, and we need to go back to basics there, and if we need to further adjust the scope of this project in reducing the size of the drain, the benefits become almost negligible, and it warrants rethinking whether we even proceed with this project at all.
Okay, so it's not starting tomorrow is what
It
I'm
is.
asking.
It is not starting tomorrow, to clarify and
Thank you.
simplify. Sorry.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the officers? Councillor Pervin.
Yes, Mr. Goodman, while you're there, I noticed in there we've got let me just find it, sorry.
Do you need Barry to help?
Yeah, maybe. We've got some replacement sections of curb and channel that are in planning phase. When's the actual construction phase after those planning phases? I see we're in May 22, just for some curb and channel around the Hudson area. I've had a few residents up there asking me, and yeah, if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, what sort of time frame we're looking at.
Through the chair, I can't provide any additional effort. I can provide additional effort. I can't provide any additional information on those particular projects beyond what's provided in the report right now. I have to go back and talk to those individual project managers, and I'll provide that information to you.
Yeah, that'd be good if you could do that. And also another one that's on there is the path upgrade for 1 second. Grey Street there, in behind the council car park. The upgrade to the footpath.
Is that Owen Street?
Yes,
Councillor
Owen
Purban?
Street. Sorry, Owen Street.
Yeah, Owen Street's a major project. It's still not quite complete in terms of design. I don't think. Certainly getting very close. It's a project that we would procurement. The delivery method is we'll be looking to go out to tender in the new year and looking to get that project delivered by contract.
All right, thank you very much. And one more, Alstop Road. There was a resheeting that needed to be done up there. I've been informed that they've actually stopped work on that road. Is there any reasoning behind that at all?
I'm not sure if Mr. Sadler couldn't provide any update on that. Alstop Road and a resheet project. No, we'll provide you with some an update on what's happening there.
What, sorry, probably through you, Mr. Judge, just an update on that. There was an update in the last Delta Road report that came out to council. There was an issue with product. It had stopped, and I know it's rescheduled to commence very shortly. So I'll just give you a hand there, Mr. Sadler. You're right. And while I have got the floor, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make a comment that it's, you know, David mentioned the sea of green. There's only a couple of ambers. That just means we go faster, Barry. You all know that. And there's not a red in there. So, I mean, it's an excellent report. And congratulations to all of your teams, because the capital work sits across varying levels. So, and further to that, I would move the recommendation.
You move the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Dewey. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Castle and Mr. Goodman. Okay, we now move on to planning. 8.1, page 97, an MCU for non-resident workforce accommodation, and Mr. Jones will present this report. Welcome.
Morning, Council.
Morning. Mr. Jones, morning.
Morning. Councillors have received an application for material change of use. The application was prepared by Gilville Planning on behalf of MBBP Proprietary Limited for the establishment of non-resident workforce accommodation within the township zone on land described as Lot 17 on RP 725498, situated at 28 Wongling Beach Road, Wongling Beach. The proposed development involves a material change of use to allow the non-resident workforce accommodation to be undertaken within the existing backpacker hostel, which has been established since 1986. Council on the site. The application was impact accessible and therefore public notification was required. 3 properly made submissions were received by Council. The site is located within the urban footprint and is considered that the application consistent with the intent of the Far North Queensland Regional Plan, as it provides for accommodation for workers who are partaking in seasonal work. The proposed development will result in the use rights changing within the rear building on the site, while the front dwellings will remain the same use. Due to the small scale change in the development on the site, there will be no impacts to the environment or ecological values on the site. Council, the application is recommended for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Councillor Purban.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jones. So really the only major change in this one is just the actual length of stay that the residents will be staying there. Is that the only real impact for the material change used for this one?
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Purban, that's correct. At the moment, with that backpacker use, it's a 3-month stay. This would allow that to be exceeded to whatever the contract is with those seasonal workers.
Thank you, Councillor Purban. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, thank you, Mr. Jones. I drove I have had several people contact me. Obviously, the location is where it is, and a few issues. I drove past the site this morning. I see that it's all cleared. The fence is up. The fence that's there, is that the fence that will be staying on there? Is that
Through the chair, that's correct.
okay? And the landscaping, it will be up to the owner occupier to make it more attractive, because it's been cleared obviously, but it's not looking great.
No, through the chair, that's correct. So the clearing which occurred there was basically just the clean up of the site. So there was all the non-remnant vegetation was cleared. They didn't touch anything which was of significant value.
Okay, and I've had questions about a live-in manager. Now, obviously, that's probably not a council thing, although it is one of the conditions.
Through the chair, councillor, condition 9 states there that an on-site manager is to be there to manage the behaviour on the site. Obviously, council can't manage that.
Yes,
behaviour,
but I believe it's been listed. It'll be a dry facility.
Through the chair, I assume that it will be. However, that really comes down to the operator of the site.
Okay, thank you. And previously, the backpackers that have been there, they have perhaps worked as well. We don't know that.
Through the chair, I assume so. A lot of the people from that facility would have partaked in the seasonal work as well.
Yes, and secondly, so if it was 3 months, I don't know, maybe, could you, I don't know if you can answer this question, but could I have stayed there for 3 months, gone down the road and come back the next day and signed up for another 3 months, thus extending it to a 6-month stay, which is now what we're looking at?
Through the chair, that's correct. So at the end of those 3 months, we could have checked out, gone to another place for one night and came back the next day.
Okay, thank you. And so also, so this is for our banana workers, I'm assuming.
Yep, through the chair.
Which we know is very important. But so what is the maximum amount of people that can be accommodated at this facility?
Through the chair, it'll be 59 people.
Okay, so therefore, are these people then perhaps taking houses, rental properties now? So if we can get the accommodation, the farm workers into the backpackers, it will possibility of freeing up rentals at Mission Beach and the Cassowary Coast, which, as we know, is in a very big demand. So.
Yeah, through the chairs, you're allowed to have up to 5 non-related people in any one household. As soon as you go over that 5 non-related persons within the Cassowary Coast region, it requires a planning application and a different type of building class. So I'd assume that 59 people, you're at least looking at a couple of houses being freed up for rentals within our area.
And should there be any problems down the road, who should people take that issue with?
Through the chair, primarily it'll be with the operator of the site, and if there's any antisocial behaviour which extends into the realm of the police, be contacting the police on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Bones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think this is a great project coming forward. I mean, there's historical use has been there since the 80s.
1986 through the chair.
Yeah, 1986, so it's been around for a long time. And I mean, I think everyone has come to the realisation that the employment market in support of our agricultural industries has changed significantly, especially during this period of the pandemic. The Pacific Labour Scheme has been in place for several years, and I know there's a lot of work into ramping the Pacific Labour Scheme up to support our local agriculturalists, not just in the Cassowary Coast, but nationally. I understand that this Pacific Labour Scheme, the teams are going to be mobile, so they may not be sitting here the entire time. They may go off and do a mango season somewhere or go pick some tomatoes elsewhere. So, and I think the other really relevant point, and thank you, Councillor Chewy, for raising it, is we're going to open up. We're all in a housing shortage at the moment, and this sort of a facility, while providing support to the local landholders, will allow us to lessen the pressure on our already struggling rental market. So, great project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further questions or comments?
Through the chair, council. Additionally, I'd just like to express that the backpackers or the short-term accommodation is still an existing use right within the building. So if the operator wishes to, lodge an application under the current local law to be permitted to run that type of facility, they can have backpackers of any nation there within that facility, as well as a non-resident workforce. Also, just wanted to outline, in 2009, council did approve that site to have 82 people reside in that building was never taken up. It's always sat at 56. So we're going to 59 now, but I just wanted to highlight there was an approval in place in 2009 to establish 82 persons on that property as a backpackers at that time. So there's a minimal increase, and the facility's there, and it'll be used. So yeah, we'll go from there.
Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. So does the current person have the opportunity to expand to the 82?
Through the chair, we're only dealing with this application of up to 59. We've assessed it on that amount of persons occupying that building and what that facility holds, and you know there's other regulations around fire and those types of things that need to be met. So we're comfortable with the 59. If it was 82, it'd probably take into the other existing buildings on the side, I think, to accommodate those types of people.
Councillor Chewy.
Just further to that, sorry. I forgot what I was going to say. So there's been no major structural changes to the existing buildings?
Through the chair, no, council. The building's pretty much in place. It'd be just a fit out of a couple of rooms there.
And do you know how long it's actually been unoccupied, not being used? So dormant with no economy being generated from residents in there?
Through the chair, I don't know that time frame. However, all we look at as through the planning component is it's an existing use right. The building hasn't been demolished. It's still able to be used for that purpose. Therefore, yeah, they can continue to use that.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to comment all the previous questions. I thought they were all great questions. And I'd like to move this motion as I think it's quite beneficial not only to farmers but also to the business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. We have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Purban. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We move on to item 8.2, page 127, MCU for multiple dwellings, 3 units on land described on lot 7. Mr Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors received an application for a sewer change of use prepared by RPS Australia on behalf of Greystoke for multiple dwellings being 3 units on land described as lot 7 RP 725498, situated at 2042 to 2044 Tully Mission Beach Road, Wongaling Beach. The site is located in the Township Zone, Greater Mission Beach Business Precinct, and has an existing shopping centre, service industry business, and a Class 1A dwelling house. I'll give you a bit of history about the site, Council, because it's pertinent to the application that's before us. So, in 2020, Council approved a Class 1A dwelling as a pavilion-style home. As per Council's planning scheme, a dwelling house is defined as a residential use or premises for one household that contains a single dwelling. The use includes outbuildings and works normally associated with a dwelling and may include a secondary dwelling. Subsequently, Council identified information that the dwelling was not being used as a single household due to the dwelling being advertised as separate units. So there was 3 actual units being used there instead of the original pavilion home that was constructed. It was actually found through a real estate advertisement. The landowner was sent a notice to lodge a relevant material change of use application for the 3 units to basically reflect what they're being used on the site at the moment. The proposed development seeks a development permit for the material change of use of multiple dwellings, being those 3 units, to facilitate individual tenancies, which are currently being rented on the site. The proposed development will legitimise the existing rental arrangements, and therefore each of the existing cabins may be rented as a separate dwelling. The recommendation is for approval, Council, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr Jones? No questions? Would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Purban, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 8.3, page 190, delegation report, and Mr Horton will present.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, through the chair. Council, presenting the November stats for the planning services area. For that November period, we had 21 approvals for planning, up from 16 in 2018-19. So we've been pretty steady and around that 20, 21 type of mark throughout the year, Council, which has been good to see. Overall, we're just in front of what we were last year, Council. We've done 97 approvals over 92, so still going along that graph line pretty well for what we need, and hopefully we'll see what next year brings. Council overall, we've done 142 dwellings for the year. which is pretty much remarkable for our last year. Our highest overall for the 5-year period was 94. So, and we just hit 533 total approvals for November. So I'm sort of hoping, yeah, we'll probably be in that higher order of 580 or 570, 580 by December, probably 100 up from the year before. So yeah, tracking nicely. Overall, we had 47 for $5 million worth of work in November. Council, the total for our total approval, 62.3 million to November to date, and 41.1 million for dwelling houses within the region, which is the estimated costs around that. The breakdown in that for the month, council was 3.5 million for dwellings, 1 million for sheds, and 390,000 on commercial 2 to 9 class buildings. I suppose the biggest thing is our searches for this month. We're 168 on any time in the previous that I've ever known from being with council. So we've done 505 searches, council, within the region. So yeah, so knowing council that we're going to 1 meeting a month next year, I'm looking to change probably in January, probably provide the report for December, but next year I'll probably go to a live type dashboard approach for you all, so you could look at that live data as it is, as we enter it, as we deal with it, as we approve it, you can be able to see it, and we'll provide that in a mechanism that allows you to be able to see that every minute of every day and ask us questions if you want, or when we come to a council meeting. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, council.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I don't have a question. I'd just like to say that it's wonderful to see all this action happening on the Cassowary coast. Good on you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on the report in relation to some of the applications that have been put forward. I actually attended the Crown Hotel last night for dinner, and what a lot of work they put into that place. It was about $3.5 million. Is that correct, Mr. Horton? Somewhere in that vicinity. I'll tell you one thing, it's really opened that street up, and just the paint job itself has really made that building come back to life.
Yeah, through the chair, it's nice to see. I'd also commend the work they have done there and a number of the other operators within town and around the, what we did with the facade improvement scheme over the time the operators got involved in that. We also know with the Camellias building, that we've seen next to the car park at the Shire Hall, the amount of money that's been spent on it and the upgrade to that. So, those owners have to be commended, and hopefully we get a few more that go down that path over time.
Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, through the chair, I've got my fingers crossed because the same people have bought the top pub here in Tully, and I already see this morning when I drove past that the gardens are all getting a good trim up and going on, so maybe that will be improved as well. So yeah, we welcome those people to Cassowary. He's actually one of the persons who, he actually was born and went to school here and was bred here, so good on him and welcome back.
Any further questions or comments for the officers? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, council. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, likewise, Mr. Horton and Mr. Jones. We move on to item 9, receipt of petitions, 9.1, page 203. Petition requesting a walking track between Tully and Alligator's Nest. And Mr. Goodman's going to present this report. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just note that Mr. Fisher is in Cairns chairing the Regional Road and Transport Group Technical Committee today, and would have liked to have been here to present this report, but I'm happy to do so in his absence. Councillors, we received a petition with greater than 300 signatures this year from, with the principal petitioner being Lynn Miller. the petition requested that council start to install a walking track between Tully and Alligator's Nest. The petition's excuse me. The petition states, we the undersigned residents petition council and ask that a walking/bike track be constructed from Tully to Alligator's Nest. We do realise it's a large and expensive undertaking and realise it would have to be done in stages. We believe this track would be well used by residents and would be a great asset leading to one of our best tourist attractions, Alligator's Nest. We believe Tully is the only town on the Cassowary coast not to have a walking or bike track. There's obviously a large number of signatories to this petition. It's quite clear that there is strong support, strong community support for improved walking opportunities in and around Tully. There have been previous requests to install a path. It's previously not been considered as a practical or a priority project for council. Previous investigations have identified significant cost and not seen it as a project that would be very well utilised. In doing some research to put this report together, one of the things that became clear is not every walking track is the same, and there are walking tracks that provide for two distinct types of users when they're walking. Those that are doing recreational walking and those that are doing commuter walking, and the design design of those different types of walking tracks should be done to provide for those pedestrians should be done differently. So when considering, the other thing is that while the petition asked that we commence on a staged approach, best practice in this area would not start committing to a staged approach before you had considered the total project and the total amount of expenditure that you were going to spend to deliver all of the project, and also those expected benefits once that project has been complete. A return, the footpath identified or requested is some 6.5 kilometres long, would require a 13-kilometre walking round trip from Tully out to Alligator's Nest. Very preliminary estimates, taking into account there's 16 major culverts or bridges to cross in that 6.5 kilometres. There's 10 minor culverts. Would require some service relocations, amendments to vehicle accesses to private property, and also a number of minor property acquisitions to deliver that total project. Preliminary estimate sits at the moment. Team have developed a number of $4.5 million. Some of the issues that were considered previously, and why this may not be a great recreational walking trip, is the speed of the road traffic and the proximity to traffic along that road, lack of rest areas and seating, lack of shade and shelter. Lack of there's a very interesting feature at the end of that track, but there's not a lot of interest to engage certainly a recreational user along that road on the way to Alligator's Nest. it's a 13.5 kilometre round trip. We are talking around a 3-hour walk, and officers believe that council would likely be better off focusing on shorter routes around key attractions within Tully if you were to be investing ratepayer funds into improving walking routes in the area. That being said, there is a new initiative that from Department of Transport and Main Roads that is encouraging councils to develop walking network plans in various communities across council, and so that is relevant to the adoption of the Queensland Walking Strategy 2019 to 2029 and an action plan for walking 2019 to 2021. And further, to encourage council to develop walking network plans, this DTMR is providing funding on a 50-50 basis up to $20,000 to develop walking network plans. So while it is not our recommendation at this time that council would commit to investment in infrastructure in the walking networks in and around Tully, it is our recommendation that we apply for assistance with DTMR under this program to develop a walking network plan for Tully, and acknowledging that a possibility that could come out of that once we do engagement is that they could recommend a walking track to Alligator's Nest as the best outcome, but that would come out in the wash. Certainly, officers have not just reacted to one petition, albeit a lot of signatories to this petition when recommending that we develop a walking network plan for Tully. We certainly considered the other major communities within our region. The main river walk in Innisfail is, while there are some couple of minor improvements that could connect that walking network better, that is certainly well established and is a great asset to those in Innisfail. Mission Beach, we have been identifying and committing funding right now to, we talked about a couple of those projects earlier, to connect up some missing links down there, and when that project is, that program of works is finalised, Mission Beach will be well connected from a walking network perspective, and the Cardwell area is very well serviced from the very significant project that was delivered post-cyclone. I'll get it out shortly, Mr. Mayor. Cyclone Yasi, and so we do. Agree with the sentiment in the with the signatories of the petition that walking opportunities in and around Tully are lacking when compared to other major centres in our region, and that is why we would recommend that we develop a walking network plan. So the recommendation is that that council would apply for funding through the Walking Local Government Grants Program to develop a walking network plan and prioritise works plan for Tully, and that council commit to allocating funds in the 22-23 operational budget, if successful, to fund council's contribution towards that plan.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. So this has been a long time coming, Mr. Goodman, and I fully support the proposed walking network plan in order to define the best solution for the relevant path for the residents and visitors of Tully. So I'd like to move the motion and look forward to working in this space.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Millwood. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Barnes. Any further commentary? I'm sure other councillors would like to Make a comment, Councillor Chewy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, through the chair, I support Councillor Millwood. Growing up in Tully, we all love Alligator's Nest. It is beautiful, but I understand people's need, thinking that would be a good idea. Logistically, however, it's probably not. As you say, we want to get to Alligator's Nest, but the journey there and the traffic along that road can be quite dangerous at times. But I do support. A lot of people walk around the Tully Showgrounds. They walk to the high school and back along that path. That's sort of the designated walking area. So I also support a network for safe and appropriate walking space in Tully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any other speakers? If not, we have a move and a seconder. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to item 10, general business. Any general business items, councillors? Councillor Millwood.
I'll get a sore arm soon.
Today.
Through the chair. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to all the team at Cassowary Coast Regional Council for another action-packed year. I would also like to wish all the staff, their families and the wider community of the Cassowary Coast and their families a very happy and safe Christmas. I would like to welcome the caretakers of the Tully Caravan Park to our region, and I wish them well in their endeavours, and the Tully Caravan Park is open for business. The opening of the photo exhibition was last night. It was put together by the Tully 100 Centenary Lead Up Committee, and it's open to the general public, so get down there and check it out. You can find this exhibition at Still Street in the old DeBella's building, and the opening hours are Monday to Wednesday 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Thursday to Saturday 9 till 12 p.m. Got one more thing. On a different note, I'd like to ask that the CEO consider removing the unsightly vehicle from the drain across from Jack Drive at Faluga. I will bring you up to date with this, but this has been an ongoing issue and has been asked of me on many occasions. It's not only an eyesore, but it's also an environmental hazard, polluting a waterway and blocking a drainage system. In my opinion, if we get permission from the farmer to remove it, as it's not his responsibility, as it was actually the result of an accident. So I just plead with you to please reconsider what we can do as council on that matter.
Through the chair, we'll take that on notice and investigate some options.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Goodman, if you're able to answer some questions. Yes. Just one for you, Mr. Goodman. I've had several people ask me about the barbecues or the lack thereof barbecues on Dunk Island. We hope that the weather will stay kind to us, and it's a very popular place over the Christmas holiday period. So could you provide an update on the situation? Thank you.
Through the chair, the barbecues that were installed there previously were removed as part of the development under the last lessees there, being Mayfair. We had hoped that we could negotiate very favourable terms with the builder, who was engaged by Mayfair, who had already procured some items that are likely to be able to not be have an appropriate place to go, and so that has not been. We haven't been able to achieve that to date. So we need to go back to the drawing board there and rethink how we can re-establish barbecues on Dunk Island. There are a number of issues at foot, though, as we continue to plan to have that facility. Certainly our long-term plan is that our caretaker arrangements are not going to be there forever. We would like to see that out to tender and somebody else leasing that spit area, and before we made any significant capital investment there, we would want to be sure that we're not building something that the new lessee is just going to come down and remove again because it doesn't fit into their plans. That being said, acknowledge the coming sort of Easter period from next year, where there would be we anticipate there will be a lot of campers keen to use that and to utilise barbecue facilities. And while I can't guarantee we will have that sorted by then, we are certainly working down that path to try and achieve that outcome where by Easter next year there would be functioning barbecues on Dunk Island.
Do we have any line of sight as to the tender process for the spit? Am I allowed?
Through the chair, there's a commitment there to engage with relevant stakeholders within the community to develop a master plan, as Mr. Goodman highlighted. We need to understand what the community's aspirations are, the traditional owners, what their aspirations are for the spit moving forward, and then we would intend to bring that master plan to council to consider and endorse to be put out for tender. So, as Mr. Goodman has highlighted, it's hard to put a definitive timeframe on that, as that process of engagement needs to be done in a collaborative way. But yeah, look, we are moving on that, and is the intent to bring that back for council consideration early next year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Just, sorry, excuse my cough. Just a couple of other things very quickly. Mr. Mayor and I attended the Salvation Army Christmas appeal, where people who were able to come and receive goods, Christmas hampers and toys. So thank you to everybody who donated to the Salvo's Red Shield appeal. It was great to see the outcome. We often, we put money in the bucket and we hope it goes to where it ought to go. And yesterday I was there to see people coming. It was a very strict process. You had to have your name registered, you had to sign in, you were given baskets of groceries. If there were toys, children in the family, you were able to collect toys. So it was great. So once again, thank you to the community. We are a generous community, and thank you to everybody who donated to the Salvation Army appeal. As I said, I saw where your money went, so thank you. Secondly, just the Australia Day. As we know, January 26th, please nominate your Australia Day hero. The ceremony itself, our CCRC ceremony, will be in Cardwell this year, so please, keep that date free, and we'd love to see you. But I spoke to Ms. Hanson this morning, and she has secured funding from the Australia Day Council. So each of our 4 pools, Cardwell, Tully, Mission Beach and Innisfail, will have pool parties for Australia Day. There will be entertainment, there will be barbecues, and there will be free entry. So yes, if you can't get to Cardwell for the awards ceremony, it'd be great to see everybody at the pools. Rain, hail or shine, it will go on. So I thank Ms. Hanson for her work there, and thank the Australia Day Council for providing that funding. And I would also like to take the opportunity to wish everybody around a very merry and safe Christmas, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further general business, Councillor Barnes?
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, we've got Mr. Goodman there, and we were talking about barbecues. There's many councils removing barbecues purely on the maintenance cost, and I'm not suggesting we do that at all. But it was only last Sunday I went to the beach, went to use it, and it was still hot, and it was absolutely filthy. Now, the poor old council will get the blame for having filthy barbecues. I just suggest that we may have to increase the signage very close to the barbecue. Please clean your mess, or something along those lines, because it is a bad look for council when the barbecues are filthy. And it's definitely not council's fault. I'm not saying that, but just take that on board if you don't mind. Last Saturday, we were lucky enough through council help and also a great organising committee to put on the bull and bike ride in Tully, it was attended by many people, and many non-charitable organisations are the beneficiaries of that, and very good, and I'd like to see everyone there next year. But we saw it at the Showtime, and we saw it at another big event, and we saw it again on Saturday night, where anyone in the grandstand, it's perfect. The toilet situation and everything is magic. When you get downstairs, and especially if you've come from outside the district, I find the signage for the toilets is very I'm not saying the toilets aren't there. I just find they're very hard for strangers to find. We had this fault after the show, and I know I've been talking to Mr. Goodman and Mr. Fisher about it, and I do know that they are going to look into it and they may bring something back to council. But it was a good night, wasn't it, Dave?
Over to you, Mr. Goodman.
Through the chair, I would like to actually do beyond what I would normally do as an officer here and get into some commentary as well. And I thought it was a fantastic event. The organisers there took some significant risk in terms of the investment that they required. They did do it with some support of council as well, but they took on some significant risk, and they did it in a way which, to be honest, that only those that are dealing with things on a shoestring budget find a way to do things. As an example, we had the best advice was that to protect the field, that a layer, and this is what is done across industry, and it's how it would be done at Lang Park or at in Sydney or any major event where they were going to hold this sort of thing. A layer of geofabric would be put down, and then ply would be put down on top of that, and then the sand on top of that. The cost for ply was calculated at around $50,000. And the organisers found a way and found some contacts to talk to one of the Ingham mills, and they used 4 layers, I think, of old tarp that had been used and was now waste product at one of the Ingham mills to cover their bagasse piles, and that was provided to them for free. Now that required some additional work to put down, and they wrecked most of those tarps in the process of putting it down and certainly taking the sand off. But it was a great outcome. They put a lot of work into it, and I just would like to personally acknowledge the effort put in and the I guess the great care that that those organisers put into doing their very best to protect the field down there. And the results were great. They weren't unlucky and copped a heap of rain, so that's good. And they all acknowledge that they can do things better in the future, having learnt learnt from that experience. To address your specific question, Councillor Barnes. Acknowledge that there certainly was some confusion around access to toilets on the night. One of the specific issues was that the locks on the doors on those toilets work on a magnetic lock rather than a lever lock, and so there are a number of people who went to use a toilet, thought it was locked because they couldn't move the handle, but actually all they needed to do was push on the door rather than move the handle, and so that certainly created some confusion, and we acknowledge that we need to improve the signage in those circumstances where those downstairs, the toilets on the bottom floor, which have been designed to be either utilised from the outside in a non-sporting event, a football event type thing, where the toilets are not used for the change rooms, that they can be used by those outside of the toilet. So, certainly acknowledge that could be better, and the organisers have acknowledged that they could have done a better job in providing advice to those attendees who didn't know the lay of the land down there, and providing them better advice of where to get access to the toilets as well.
Good, thank you, Mr. Goodman. Very well answered. And lastly, we have seen the TMR washing some of the mildewed signs that many councillors have been mentioning. A lot of entrance signs to our towns, but not all of them are getting done. They seem to be doing 3/4 of them and missing a few. So when dealing with TMR, could you just please bring it to their attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Any further? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank the Cassowary Coast Regional Council staff, the EMT staff and my fellow councillors for their welcoming support over the past 4 months. And I want to wish the entire Cassowary Coast a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you for those touching words, Councillor McLeod. Councillor Baines.
I don't think I'm going to be last today.
All right.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I thought I'd jump in early. A comment I'd like to make today was around the acknowledgement to country. As we very first started off today, I'm sure that residents noticed it was a particular piece of wording, and that wording has been sculptured by Council's own internal reconciliation action plan team. Working together in consultation, and Mr Mayor, I mean there's been comments running around probably in the last month or so about the hollowness of some of these, and I would say that the acknowledgement to country today, very heartfelt. It's designed by our own team within the organisation, and I commend the work of the people who put it together. Very well done, great work. Again, season's greetings to everyone, whether you're having a Merry Christmas or a Happy Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate during this time. Please have a wonderful time with your family, be kind to each other, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further agenda items? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. Mr Goodman, just in relation to our wayfinding signs that have been erected, I'm not too sure if it's been brought up before about I've had a few residents inquiring about can some garden beds be laid around them? Can council look into that or not?
Through the chair, can we consider it? Yes, we can. It's not part of the scope of the existing project, but certainly if there was a desire to do some additional work there in the future, that can be scoped out, budgeted, and permission applied to do that work on the main roads corridor.
Yeah, it'd be good if we could get a bit of a costing for what it would cost us to do that. The signs are beautiful, just they're a little bit bland around the bases with those concrete bases, so we could cover them to a height just to make them a bit appealing. Would be quite good.
Through the chair, I think it's certainly happy to provide some sort of draft scope for you to consider, and then if we've got that right, do some work in developing budget around that. One of the key things we do acknowledge is before we get into doing additional gardens is that we do need to manage the risk over the next couple of months when grass growth accelerates, is that those town entry signage remains visible and doesn't become obscured by grass growth in the area. So we're aware of it. It's something that needs to be added into our operational plans, and we'll do our best to deliver on that in the first instance.
All right, thanks, Mr Goodman. And I'd too like to wish our staff and all the residents of the Cassowary Coast and the wider community a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you very much to my fellow councillors as well.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. Just following on from Councillor Pervin, is there space, we have had this conversation, Mr Goodman, for community to work with council? Because I know we've had the discussion at Mission Beach, there's a group at Mission Beach with this wayfinding signs, to work with council to make some gardening or around those signs, to come on board and obviously work with council.
Through the chair, we could take that on notice. Obviously, it's a road. There's a high level of risk having individuals working within a road reserve. There may be other solutions that we can provide that also don't require any ongoing maintenance. I guess we need to consider the whole of life costs, and garden beds and gardens can at times require maintenance, as Mr Goodman has pointed out. So we could provide a number of options which not just show the capital, but that whole of life cost. But some of those may be able to provide some opportunity for community engagement. We would like them to take pride in those entry statements.
Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. And also I've got a question for the CEO. Last Saturday we had a major water blowout in the evening, and the normal number that we ring, the 1300 number, people had extensive time of music which didn't go over very well. We've spoke about that previously. I know Adam is, Mr. Sadler is onto that. So I'd just like to make mention that there is consideration of improving that. Looks like he's going to have an answer of it.
I'll let Mr. Sadler address that, but on Saturday, I'm aware Councillor Baines also spent 9 minutes on the phone, and I myself spent 5 minutes on that line trying to escalate an issue within the community, but I'll allow Mr. Sadler to address that.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. CEO and Deputy Mayor, for your question. Yes, we have had a few little issues over the weekend, and I think we are doing some analysis on the data. We do record and we do log all the data coming in electronically. Our phone system, which was upgraded recently, is enabling us to do that. So the team's doing the analysis on that. And our coordinator for the customer service team has been contacting a number of those customers to talk to them about what happened and what number they rang. So I just need to remind everyone that we do have a 1300 number, 1300 763 903, which gets us through particularly after hours and all hours, so 24/7. 1300 763 903. And so some customers are ringing old numbers and direct officer line numbers, and so they don't go through to the after hours number. So we just need to remind everyone of that. And also the call centre that does supply us with that service has been pretty busy, and earlier on today that you had a discussion with my peer director here around some of the flooding and other issues happening in the southeast corner and lower in the state, and they have been supporting them as well. So that has contributed to some of the delay. You know, our longest call that we've seen so far is about 14 minutes, so that's not acceptable, and we're working through that. In addition, we are collating our documentation to go out to review that service provider moving forward.
Happy with that, Councillor Barnes. Mr. Sadler, would you mind sending that number through to all the councillors, because we're heading into the Christmas period. We're bound to get calls that we need to action, and if we could have a refresher via an email with that number, would be great.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Any further general business? I just want to clarify in relation to the Salvation Army hampers and the work that those volunteers do and the recipients that were looked after yesterday. Councillor Chewy's been unfairly described, characterised as a photo bomber. I just want to put it in context. The recipients yesterday treated her with respect, and she's now called the Ham Queen. Not the photo bomber, she's the Ham Queen. I just want to ask Mr. Goodman a question about something that ABC interviewed me on and asked for a statistic around Port Hinchenbrook. When we took over the asset last Friday, we're now looking after the maintenance for the existing residents. What is that number? And the rest of the question is, when that new plant is up and running and all the blocks are covered with homes and they're hooked up to our system, what's the maximum potential number that will be connected and paying rates, and therefore bring that cost down that Councillor Millwood raised earlier today? So the existing residents that will get the benefit of the maintenance, but when it's fully reached its potential, how many ratepayers will be hooked into our system? I think Mr. Bradford's got the answer.
I exercised my skills from grade 4 the last time I played halfback, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Bradford's, I could have a stab at it, but I think Mr. Bradford's, yeah, thank you.
Morning again, councillors. Through the chair, the estate has about 320 properties within the estate currently. About 180 of those are developed at this stage, so there's about 140 left to build on. A number of the properties in there already, you might see that have already have been divided into duplexes and things like that. But as those properties continue to develop, there is an increase in income from the sewage charge, which can contribute to the costs of operating and economies of scale.
So just for clarification, right at this moment, about 180 residents get the benefit of us doing the maintenance. Potentially, all the blocks covered, it'll be up to around 320 plus duplexes on top of that.
Yeah, that's correct. If there's further development on lot 99, the main commercial lot, that's where you start to see some major improvement in the cost of sewage within the estate.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. I just want to clarify, that was a question from ABC Radio and I couldn't answer it. I thought I'd get the answer today.
Yep.
Thank you. And is there any further general business? Okay. Councillors, there's been several freedom of choice rallies which councillors have attended and we've listened intently. Councillor Chewy attended a business alliance that's recently been formed. 60 members were present and again, she listened and we now respond accordingly through this Merrill Minute. We're all in this together has become a well-worn phrase over the past 20 months, and rightly so. We are all in this together as COVID-19 pandemic continues to present challenges to so many facets of our lives. Life has changed drastically over the last 2 years, and over the next few weeks, life will change again, with the borders reopening and the Queensland Government mandates coming into effect. The Cassowary Coast Regional Council recognises and respects the concerns of residents, ratepayers and business owners within the region in relation to the pandemic. This council also acknowledges the individual rights of residents and visitors to the Cassowary Coast to exercise their freedom of choice when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine. The council encourages those willing and able to get vaccinated to do so, to help protect our community. We know there are many challenges being faced on many fronts, including continuing to stimulate the economy, create employment, fill essential roles, reconnect families through domestic and international travel, and all while protecting the more vulnerable members of our community from COVID-19. This is an emotive issue and one which has divided many people, even within families. I have been receiving communication from residents both for and against the rollout of the state government mandates, and there is much emotion and fear on both sides. Local government does not play a role in public health policy, and the mandates are the responsibility of the state government. It's not an area where myself or council has the expertise to comment or offer advice to the state government. What we can do is listen to the community, provide our support. I encourage you, no matter what side of the fence you sit on, to continue utilising your democratic right and speaking out to your local member. I therefore recommend 1. The Cassowary Coast Regional Council recognises and respects the concerns of residents, ratepayers and business owners within the region in relation to the pandemic. 2. Council respectfully requests the state government take into account the concerns of some individuals and members of the business community and reconsiders the decision to introduce restrictions for unvaccinated people from the 17th of December 2021. And 3. Council also requests that the state government offers support to small business and the hospitality sector, namely regional operators, who may struggle to resource this mandate. So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bain, second. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. That brings us to an end to general business, and we now close the meeting to the public. The reasons for closing the meeting to the public are item 11.1, page 230, outstanding rates and charges. 11.2, page 236, contract for green waste processing. 11.3, page 239, contract Rising Main Bonnevilla Gravity Sewer. And 11.4, page 242, legal matters update. Would somebody move that we close the meeting to the public? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors and staff, we'll reopen the meeting to the public. Would somebody move we do so, please? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 11.1, page 230, outstanding rates and charges, and Ms Vick will present this report. Afternoon.
Council has been undertaking recovery action on a number of properties to recover outstanding rates. It is proposed to commence sale of land proceedings and debt recovery action on 24 properties as per Schedule 1 and in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Regulation 2012. Recommendation that Council proceed to commence the sale of land for the properties detailed in Schedule 1 of this report for overdue rates and charges in accordance with Section 140 of the Local Government Regulation 2012.
Any questions for the officer on that report? If not, would somebody move, please? Moved by Councillor McLeod, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms Vick. Item 11.2, page 236, contract for green waste processing, and Mr Hammond will present this report. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor. Good afternoon, councillors.
Afternoon.
The report I'm presenting is the tender outcome of the Cassowary Coast Regional Council's green waste processing and disaster green waste processing. Our council currently produces approximately 25,000 cubic metres of mulch from 6 sites across the region. Our current arrangements have expired, hence the reason to go out to tender. The tender prices were for a 3-year period. The tenders closed on the 8th of November, and we received 2 conforming tenders. Those 2 tenders went through an evaluation based on value, relevant experience, methodology, and how they actually did the job or proposed to do the job, and the local content. The outcome of that is that the team that reviewed those tenders have recommended that we provide a fixed term schedule of rates conforming tender for contract CCW 000061 for green waste processing to Panabianco Enterprises trading as Cairns Mulch, as they are the most advantageous to council for a price of $6.20 per cubic metre exclusive of GST. We also recommend that the fixed term schedule of rates conforming tender for contract CCW 000061 for the disaster green waste processing as submitted by Panabianco Enterprises Proprietary Limited trading as Cairns Mulch be accepted at the price of $7.20 a cubic metre. And thirdly, that Council delegate authority to the Chief Executive Officer in accordance with the Local Government Act 2009 to enter into a contract, negotiate, finalise and execute any and all matters associated with or in relation to the contract, subject to Council's normal procurement policies and practices.
Thank you, Mr Hammond. Any questions? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor... I've got a question. Were you going to second it? Seconded by Councillor Chewy. Question from Mr Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, Mr Hammond. Just to clarify for people, where can they go and collect mulch from, please?
So the 6 transfer sites, that's every transfer site we've got with the exception of Murray Upper, they can collect mulch.
And is there a charge involved if people were to collect the mulch?
If it's domestic quantities, no. If it's commercial quantities, there is a fee set, and I think it's $5 a cubic metre.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Barnes.
Mr Hammond, further on for that, the hours of each individual site for the free loading of mulch, have you got that?
Off the top of my head, I'll give it a good crack. The hours of operation at Stodders is from 8 o'clock through to 4 p.m. Tully is 8 to 4. Murray Upper is 4 hours on a Saturday. Hull Heads is 4 hours on a Sunday, and I think that's the morning slot. You're shaking your head. Is that the question?
No, I didn't mean the opening hours of the sites. I meant the hours that we could, like our elderly, could take their trailer and load the mulch.
Okay.
No.
No, that's a.
I spoke to Mr. Hammond a good while ago, and I said we've got an ageing population who cannot shovel the mulch. Could he please put a bobcat on, say for a few hours a week, to load the mulch, especially for the elderly? Sorry,
I understand
Mr.
your
Hammond.
question now. So for Cardwell, it is every Monday. Bells Creek is every Friday. There's a bobcat available there to load mulch. Tully and Stodders, there's a facility, there's a loader available all the time. Murray Upper and Hull Heads, it's by shovel.
Now, my other question is, what say you're an elderly person and you don't have a licence or a trailer, and I get Peter or Paul to bring his truck, and he's just going to drop it in my garden and I handle it from there? Will you classify him as a contractor and charge him, or will it go back to the elderly gentleman for domestic use?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Each particular vehicle have its own surroundings, and I suppose if you've got an elderly person who's employed someone to do that under a contract, that contract would be a cash arrangement. It's a commercial arrangement. If in fact it's a different arrangement where it's coming back to the person, and it's obviously a domestic quantity, there will be no charge.
See, I think you're wrong there, because this gentleman is not going to buy the mulch. This contractor is not going to buy the mulch and resell it. The resident is getting it free. He's just getting this gentleman to cart it.
Yep.
So how could we charge that person commercial rate?
Yep.
How can we do that?
I think that we talk about domestic quantities. If you start talking about large truckloads, that could be seen as commercial quantities, and we'd have to assess each one on what's available at that time.
So what's the process for an elderly gentleman who hasn't got a licence, hasn't got a car, hasn't got a trailer, and wishes to get a contractor to pick it up? What's his process? He can't afford to be paying more than I, who luckily enough to own a trailer, is going to get it free.
I can only say that large quantities of green waste are contractors. That's a commercial operation. If there's a specific circumstance, we can consider that on its merits. And at the moment, I've not got enough information to give you a specific answer on that one.
I'd like to continue this conversation down the track, maybe at a CIS one day.
Certainly.
Okay, thanks very
Councillor
much.
Barnes, the office has taken it on notice and will investigate it.
Thank you.
Any further, Councillor Barnes?
No, I've mentioned it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Any further questions for the officer? If not, will somebody move the recommendation, please? Okay, moved and seconded. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I did have one last thing. I've missed it. With these contractors doing the mulching, we pay them, which the dollars you mentioned, we measure that mulch after it's mulched, not before. Correct?
After it's mulched, there is a calculation in the
Yes.
scope document that sets out very clearly how the figure is brought to, how the figure is arrived at.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
More than welcome.
We now move on to 11.3, page 239, contract Rising Main, Bonner Villa Gravity Sewer, and Mr. Goodman's going to present this report. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Councillors, purpose of this report is for Council to consider submitted tenders and award a contract CCW 000154 for the SPS 29 Rising Main and Bond Villa Gravity Sewer. Works associated with this contract entail the supply and installation of a new rising main from SPS 29 to a new overflow release point at the river, along with the supply and installation of a new gravity sewer down Bona Avenue, along Bonvilla Street and through the park connecting to sewer on Lyons Road. The scope of these contracts will significantly improve our sewerage reticulation network, particularly in high rainfall events where there has been some regular overflows into private land in the past. Councillors, the recommendation is that Council accept the lump sum tender for an amount of $772,058, excluding GST, for contract CCW 000154 for SPS 29 Rising Main and Bond Villa Gravity Sewer, submitted by CCUS Proprietary Limited as being the most advantageous. Secondly, delegate authority to the Chief Executive Officer in accordance with the Local Government Act 2009 to enter into a contract, negotiate, finalise and execute any and all matters associated with or in relation to the contract, subject to Council's normal procurement policies and practices.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any questions for the officer? No questions. Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to item 11.4, page 242, legal matter update, and Mr Graffin will present this report.
Thank you. Through the Chair, this report is providing an update which was requested at local government meeting 25th November 2021, where a confidential report was tabled to Council, and the recommendation from that report was to note, that we would, note the decision handed down in a bankruptcy matter, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate the terms of an agreement with Mr James Scott regarding defamation matter D16917, and also requesting the Chief Executive Officer to advise Mr Gott that Council has no appetite to progress with the defamation matter if there is no prospect of recovering costs and damages. This report provides an update to Council on those matters and those conversations, and also provides a recommendation. I do need to note with that recommendation that the officer is amending that recommendation slightly based on activity in the defamation matter that's occurred prior to the agenda being released, and considering the matter today. So I do note the recommendation, or the amended recommendation, will now read, number 1, that Council note the report, legal matter update. Number 2, note that following local government meeting 25 November 2021, Council has been advised that Mr James Gott has sought the consent of defendants to discontinue the defamation matter D16917, and this is the addition, and that a response to notice of discontinuance has been provided by the defendants. Item 3, note Mr James Gott's lawful indemnification in defamation matter D16917 as per resolution number 0252 at local government meeting held on the 7th of December 2017. And 4, note that as per provision of legal assistance for employees and councillors policy extends to former employees, including Mr James Gott, for consideration.
Thank you, Mr Graffin. Any questions for the CEO? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to the close of the meeting, but before we close, I just want to highlight, been a pretty big agenda today. That was a test case for next year when we go to 1 meeting a month. Get ready for it. We'll be finishing much later than this next year. Also, I'd like to acknowledge that there'll be a federal election early next year, and I believe that it's going to be tight, and Mr Katter might just have what he believes he's got now, the balance of power, which is very good for our region in terms of funding opportunities, and we'll wait and see what the voters deliver. The other thing I want to mention is the Christmas break-up tomorrow. It will be a treat because 7 councillors are going to wear their aprons and we're going to dig in, and it'll be us looking after our staff for a change. So on that note, I just want to say to our staff, a Merry Christmas, a prosperous New Year from all 7 councillors and also from my wife Marsha and I. So thank you for what you've done for us in a pandemic. I think it's been a great 20 months. We've got a little bit over 2 years to go in our term. Kicked a big goal today with something I never thought would be achieved with Port Hinchenbrook, and let's hope we can get around some of the legacy issues that we inherited 20 months ago. We're getting close to that point, and I think it's going to be great remaining half of our term. So with all that, if anybody's travelling, please travel safe, and look forward to seeing everybody at the Christmas party tomorrow. Thank you. Meeting closed at 12:25.